Hi, I'm Katie McBrine. I'm running for State Senate in Plymouth and Norfolk. I'm the Democratic candidate, and my opponent is Republican incumbent Patrick O'Connor. So my name is Katie McBrine, and I'm running for State Senate in Plymouth and Norfolk, which is all of kind of the South Shore towns. It includes Weymouth, Hingham, Hull, Cohasset, Scituate, Marshfield, Duxbury, Norwell. Yes, it's a big district. I'm a pediatrician and a mom. I've been a pediatrician for over a decade now. I originally grew up on the south side of Chicago. Met my husband in medical school, so we are the exciting two-doctor family. And then he lives out, he grew up in Foxborough, which is what brought us back out here, is his family's out here. We have two kids. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. We live in Hingham, and they go to public school there. And I work in Scituate, which is an excellent town if you ever go and hang out in Scituate. So I'm still practicing as a pediatrician right now. I work 4 days out of the week, and then I campaign every other minute of the day. So what makes a doctor or a pediatrician run for office? Well, I'll tell you, it doesn't happen very often, and it should happen more. But the 2016 election happened, and I think that horrified and energized, kind of a combination of both, a lot of people, and it did so for me. And so I decided that I needed to be a little bit more politically active than I was. I kind of focused on medicine and didn't really, besides voting, pay too much attention. And so I decided to start paying attention. And I got involved in the Democratic Town Committee and started postcard writing, and then I decided to lobby, which is a fun experience if you guys have never lobbied before. That's kind of a neat sort of thing. And I actually lobbied my opponent on a bill that was really near and dear to my heart about making health information for our students medically accurate. And I left feeling good about that conversation, but then I decided to follow up on it and found out that he voted no on that bill. And it got me really upset because I believe, again, in having things being medically accurate, especially for our students. So I, at that time, met the most amazing campaign manager in the world. So if you decide you're going to jump in and run for a campaign, I highly recommend Melissa Smith. But she's my friend, and we were kind of discussing about it and what further stuff that I could do. And we decided that there's no physicians in our state house that we can find, and there really isn't that much diversity of opinion in our state house, and we need more. It's hard to run for office. I understand that now more than ever. But we need people to run because we need people who care about different things. We need teachers in our state house. We need union workers in our state house. We need scientists in our state house. Because everyone brings a different skill set to the State House and can work on different things so that together we can make our state great. And we don't have that. So, oh, look, here we go, here's the man. So that was kind of the main reason for running. And so I've been running since March, I think, and we've been hitting the ground running and doing a ton of stuff. And meeting amazing people. Like Governor Michael Dukakis. I will lend it over to you for a little bit.
Thank you all very much. This is an interesting place to get to, particularly if you're not an iPhone guy. I'm not an iPhone guy. And MapQuest was a little difficult, but I made it, so here we are. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking at you. I mean, there's a lot of work to do, and I think we're going to go out and knock on some doors and do some good work, except to say to you that apart from my respect and admiration for Katie and what she would bring to state government of the state, don't buy this notion that we've got a governor who's overwhelmingly popular and so on and so forth. The last poll I saw, Baker was at 52. If you're an incumbent and you're 52, you got to be a little concerned. And in any event, folks, whatever happens in the gubernatorial race, we need a legislature that does more than simply work on legislation. Part of your job as a legislator is to try to get good legislation passed. But the other part of your job is exercising oversight over the executive branch, no matter who is running that executive branch. And I'm not seeing much of that these days. Now, I happen to be particularly concerned about the state of the state's transportation system, and I'll talk about that briefly only. But I think one of the things that Katie brings to this is not only a professional background, which is so very important, but I don't have to tell you these days just how important the whole healthcare thing is. Now, this state, is, to its credit, has done a lot better than most states when it comes to that. But it's a constant battle. We're dealing with not only a strange administration in Washington, but that one, for reasons I don't understand, seems to think that taking health care away from 20 or 25 million people is a good thing to do. Katie will tell you that if we do that, folks, then the emergency rooms of this country are going to be full of people who've lost their insurance and whose only alternative is go to the emergency room, which, unless you have a genuine emergency, is the worst place in the world to go. Not because I don't think the ER people that we have serving us aren't terrific people, but that's not where you ought to be getting primary care. And one of the things the Affordable Care Act did was to dramatically reduce the number of folks that were using the emergency room as their primary doctor because they didn't have one. And what we ought to be doing is working hard to get those 9 million people in the United States of America that still don't have comprehensive health insurance the opportunity to do that. And why, folks, this great country of ours has been unable to achieve that goal is beyond me. I like the legislature, and some of my best friends in the legislature, but I don't hear a lot of noise from the legislature. I don't hear the kind of oversight that we ought to be getting. And it's going to take people like Katie to give us that. You got to be kind of loud. You got to raise a little hell, and if you got to use the press to do that, but you can make a huge difference. One individual legislator can make an enormous difference, especially if she is focusing on a particular policy area that she knows well. That's one of the great things about her and about her candidacy. So it's good to be with you. I'm glad I made it. Took a few twists and turns, but that's okay. More than happy to be here to not only support Katie, but to urge you on. And trust me, folks, it's you that will make the difference. It's true that I'm a little obsessive on the subject of precinct-based grassroots organizing, but that's the way I got elected. In any event, it's good to be here on a glorious and relatively pleasant, not so humid summer day, to be with you, to be as supportive as we can of Katie and what she's doing, and to make sure that we have people in that legislature of ours who will speak up, will focus on important issues, folks, and make things happen. We're fortunate to be in a state these days that is doing fairly well in an economic sense, but it's not looking ahead, and it's especially not looking at what we're going to be facing. And that's why it's so important to have good people like Katie with us. So, great to be with you. Thanks for having me, and let's go out and win this thing. Thanks.
All right, so basically, as a pediatrician, the biggest part of my platform is healthcare, and it's the one thing that I'm most passionate about. And I will tell you, when I go to the doors and I talk to people, that's pretty much the only thing that we talk about because they have a doctor standing in front of them. I also look at rashes. I do lots of things. But you guys don't have to do that. However, basically healthcare is a mess, which that's what I start off with, and every single person on the door agrees that healthcare is a mess, and everybody's affected by it. And usually they would like to tell you how they know healthcare is a mess. And my response to that is, and what my plan is ultimately, is to go to a more universal system. There's all sorts of terms that get thrown around between single payer and Medicare for all, but essentially we need a universal system. Because right now this piecemeal thing where the insurance companies are in charge and dictate the care between your primary care provider and you is nonsense. So we need to get them out of that room, and we need to get the care back between me and you. So that's what I am going to be pushing for and striving for in Massachusetts. It would be best if we can get it throughout the whole United States, but with the current administration, that's probably not going to be possible. But if we lead, and Massachusetts was a leader, if we lead again, we can get other states to jump on board, and eventually we can get this across the country like we need to. And there are ways that we can help stop what the insurance companies are doing to all of us and help our families, because we really need to. So that's the first part of the platform. The second part is we talk about the opioid crisis, or I do talk about the opioid crisis, because there's a lot of people in our district that has been hurt by it. And it doesn't affect the person who has addiction, it affects the family, it affects the whole community. And I think that we need a physician, because it is a very complicated problem to solve. Addiction is hard. It's hard on everybody, and it's hard to solve it. And we're not doing enough to try to combat this problem. And so too many people, again, are struggling, and I can't sit by and watch it anymore. So there's lots of stuff that we can do to try to combat that problem, but know that it's a big priority for me. Second is education. As a pediatrician, I care about education a lot, and I see that there's some discrepancies in how we're doing education. We're missing out on a big chunk of our little ones. 0 to 5 is really prime time for little guys. They're like sponges, and you can actually make a huge difference in a kid's life if you diagnose things sooner and give them help and care sooner, especially when it comes with education. And we're missing this gap of helping these kids. And unfortunately, what we'd like to call it is bending the curve, and we're not bending the curve with these kids because we're missing out on it. And we need to push for that. There's terms that get thrown out too by universal pre-K, which is great, and we should be doing that, and that helps the 4-year-olds. But we also need to help the 3-year-olds, and we need to help working families who don't have access to affordable daycare that helps their kids. So there's that, and then there's the opposite end of the spectrum. So if you go to a house and they have college students, those kids are drowning in debt before they even start their career. And that's what I talk to my college kids about before I kick them out of my practice. And they are, it's tough. It's really hard for them, and they're switching majors because they can't afford all the debt and to go into the career that they want to go into. And that just makes me really disheartened. So we have to work on alleviating some of that debt for these kids and figuring out how we can best serve our college kids. Because kids are our future. And if we make things better for kids, it makes things better for all of us. So that's kind of the prime focus of where I want to go with that. I care about the environment. If the environment is a thing that you guys care about, because we should all care about the environment, that's, I'm a science person. I read studies all the time. We have this compressor station that they're trying to put in, which is horrible, and that we need to put in an air quality monitoring station. So that's one of the things that we can push. That's what I'm going to try to push to put in there so that we can get some more data about how horrible the air quality is over there, so that hopefully we can stop the compressor station from being put in. The environment, and then the transportation is a big thing. It doesn't run very efficiently or effectively, and we need to fund it so that it does, because you can't get kids to school and you can't get workers to work if we don't have a public transportation that works. So those are kind of all the main issues, but I'm a Democrat. I'm the only Democrat running in this race, and I believe in the Democratic platform wholeheartedly. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the Democratic platform, it's really amazing. There's stuff on voting, fixing voting and voting regulations. There's stuff for civil rights. There's all sorts of great stuff that if we followed our platform, we'd be in really great shape. So that's all my stuff. Hopefully that gives you guys enough information about me and you like it. And then we need to do more of this. I can't stress enough this grassroots efforts that we're doing. Getting in front of people, the message is really getting out and we're getting a lot of momentum. And I'm proud to say, knocking on doors, when we were doing this months ago, people didn't know who I am, and now I knock on doors and they do know. They heard from a friend or they saw signs. Signs are going up. If you know anybody who has lawns, I got signs. It's not an idea that I came up with. This has been in the works for a very long time, and way smarter people than me have been looking at this and come up with a way that we can do it. So here's the thing. We have a government insurance that works pretty well. Most people like Medicare, right? There's problems with it, but if we expand it to everyone, we have to fix some of these problems with it. But by and large, it works really well and has very low administration costs. So part of what is a big money suck in health care is through administration costs. On average, it's about 30% in most insurance companies for that, but in Medicare, it runs at about 3% administration costs. So it's a lot of savings from that. The other way that you look at savings for it is through prescriptions and the pharmaceutical industry. If you have a big state, you can argue for cheaper prescriptions. And honestly, we need to regulate that a little bit better so that they're not raising prices on things. But so those are kind of two cost-saving stuff. And so what I say to people when they say, well, I don't want to pay taxes for it, you're paying money now. You're paying a lot of money now. So even though we don't call it a tax, you are paying a lot into this system. So actually, if we consolidated it and put it instead as just one money pot as a tax, and you have to. I can't eliminate what you're paying for it and then have something for free. That's not how that works. We'll eliminate what you and businesses who are struggling under the weight of all of this. Then we pool that money and we put a tax on it. So you put a tax, there's going to be a business tax and there's going to be an individual tax for it in order to fund this. But they've worked the numbers and it works out more effective and efficient. And so that's what I tell people is, that it can work. We have the data to support that it can work, and that's how it would work.
Thank you. What are your vote?
So it's a ratio. So they came up with a list of, depending on where you're in the hospital, what your nurse to patient ratio would be. So like if you're in the intensive care unit, it would be a 1-to-1 nursing with an exception if you have a stable patient or not. If you're on the floor, I forget the exact number, so I don't want you to necessarily quote me on it, but it would be a 1 to like 3 to 5 or something like that. There's a specific number. Right now, it is done through having a nurse manager and having how many patients and kind of deciding, who's has higher acuity versus lower acuity. And so what the nurses are saying is that in a lot of situations they have too many patients and they can't take care of all of these patients, and it makes it for an unsafe environment if they're not watching where all the medications are going and double checking the things that they need to do, or providing the checks that they need to do. So that's where the nurses are coming from, is saying we're seeing this happen too frequently, that people are not listening to us. We're being put in these situations that are unsafe for the patients, and we want to have some sort of regulation and oversight that says I can only have so many patients, because right now there isn't, except it's like hospital driven on how many they think they could or not. So first I want to start off with saying this is the problem with our current state house, is that they're not passing things, right? People are concerned and they keep coming up and they're not able to pass even simple stuff like I was talking, about is making health information for our students medically accurate. That didn't pass. So we're having a real hard time getting things that we're concerned about and we care about through our legislature. That's a problem. And because that's a problem, it goes to ballot questions. And this is why we're seeing a ton of ballot questions. And so this ballot question is actually really complicated, right? And it's a yes or no. So that's unfortunately, that's your only choice for a very complicated thing. The reason why it's complicated is because everything in healthcare is complicated. Our system is so complicated. So I will throw out there that I am voting yes on this question. And the reason why I'm voting yes on this question is, as a pediatrician, I ultimately care about safety. And so that's what this comes down to me, is the nurses have been saying that we think what is going on is unsafe, and we need to make it safer for patients. And that's a core belief of mine. Yes, let's make things safer for everybody, right? And that's what they're telling us. And they've been trying this for a long time, and no one's been listening. And so it came to a ballot question. The problem is, it's going to be expensive. Nothing's for free. That's the crux of the issue. However, I think this is why it's really important to have a physician in the State House, because I understand this issue. I could fight for this issue. I've been a part of this community, right? I'm in the healthcare field. I know how expensive this can be. And the worry is that if you implement this, then the hospitals are going to start cutting programs in order to pay for the nurses, right? That's what's going out there. And that very well may be true, because money has to come from somewhere, and I don't think the CEOs are taking it out of their pockets. So, but we need to have someone in there to fight so that regardless of how this ballot question comes out, and I want you guys to research it. There's going to be lots of information, right? And so regardless of how you vote on it, know that if I'm in the State House, we're going to make it work. If the ballot question passes as yes, then great, but then we need to figure out the money, because it's going to take money, and we need to make sure that programs don't get shut down, and that we can figure out where this money is going to go to and how best to implement this in a safe way. If it gets voted down, it's no, well, it still doesn't solve the problem that nurses are saying it's unsafe. So we have to look at this, and we have to revisit it, and we have to figure out how we can make it safer for everybody in this room. Because at one time or another, you're going to be in the hospital, and we would really like to be safe, right? So it's complicated. I hope I helped a little bit and didn't confuse you a little bit more. But I do believe in transparency in government, and I believe that you should know how I'm feeling about things, even if you don't necessarily want to agree with me or not on it. So that's how I feel about it, and that's where I'm going with it. But I just want you to know, I think, again, that's another reason why having a physician, especially with these kinds of issues, is really important. What we've been doing right now is preventing more prescriptions from happening, right? So that was kind of the quick stuff that we've done, which we needed to do, okay? So right now, prior to some changes, there wasn't a lot of communication between pharmacies and providers, prescribers. So people can go to different places and pick up scripts from different people, and there wasn't a centralized way to know what was going on. So now we do, and there's also a limit to how much you can prescribe, which is a problem, actually, and we need to look into that, because there are people who have chronic pain and cancer and need to have opioids. They're not entirely, nothing is really all black and all white, right? I mean, people are in pain and they need pain medication. So, and we've made it, unfortunately, difficult for the people who actually need it. So we need to look at that and revisit that, because again, when you're starting to make laws, sometimes people, if they're not in the field, don't realize these things. And so, me being in the field, I do realize these things, and that's one of the things that we have to fix on it. So the idea was that now we communicate better, and so we can help decrease the amount of opioid prescriptions that are flooding the market. But the problem is, we're not helping the people who have addiction right now, and we're not doing enough for them. And so part of it is that we need to incentivize, or we need to encourage more providers to get training to medically manage opioid addiction. The example that I give is that when I first started as a pediatrician, I didn't know how to manage ADHD very well, or anxiety or depression in kids. It's just not something that we were taught during residency very well. But having seen enough kids, I realized the need for it. And so I took extra courses and extra training, and now I can help manage some ADHD and some anxiety and depression in kids. So it's the same thing for doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, is that we need to get them to take some classes and learn and be more comfortable to medically manage this, because there's very much a need for this right now, and we just don't have enough people. We also need to bring back in mental health with physical health. The fact that it got split, it's very tricky by insurance companies that they did that, but it's all part of the same body, and we need to put that back together, and we need to fund it because it matters. So I am the Moms Demand Gun Sense candidate. I am very much for gun safety. I'm for safety in general. I love safety. It's part of my preventative talk with all my kids. We talk about, do you wear your helmet, are you wearing your seatbelt, and do you have a gun in the house? And I don't understand why we treat guns differently, because it's a weapon, and that's what it was made for, and that's what it does, and it doesn't do anything else. And it's not to say that you can have it. It's our rights as a United States citizen. I do not want to take away your guns. I want you to be safe. That's what I want you to do. Ultimately, with anything, I would like you to be safe. When you get in a car, I would like you to be safe. When you ride a bike, I would like you to be safe. And so when you own a gun, I would like you and your children or anybody else in the house to be safe. And we just need to treat it as such. So that's where I stand when it comes to guns, and I think that the Massachusetts has really great gun laws, and because of that we have very low gun violence rates, and that's not a coincidence. That's because of that, and so I think we need to protect that, because I think that's great about our state is that we have really low gun violence rates, and then I think any way that we can think about helping to protect and to make each other safer is great. So that's where I stand when it comes to the gun issue. I mean, I support Maura Healey in all her efforts. She's an amazing Attorney General, and I support what she's been doing in all aspects of her job. But yeah. Thank you guys for coming.